Hello everyone, my name is Art Loft and I am a 3D hobbyist. This tutorial will cover the process whereby we reduce a high resolution mesh to a low poly mesh, then bake the high resolution details onto the low resolution. This is a chameleon that I did in Nomad Sculpt, and as you can see the resolution is quite high. It has lots of details which were required. The resolution that we had was required for these details, although it is fairly low still as far as sculpting is concerned. So in Blender, pressing N will bring out the side toolbar, and we're going to choose QuadRemesher. It's a great program. If you've never tried it, there is a trial version. Does a great job. We're going to reduce the quad resolution to 4000, down from 5. And once we do that, we can press Remesh. And what's going to happen is it's going to hide the original high poly object and then create a low poly version, which will give it a label at Retopo. There it is there. As you can see now, we've lost all our details. So this works well for animating if you want to rig the animal, add some animation movement. You can also, even if you're not working towards that end and you just want to do a really nice job with texturing, then you can add a UV map at this time, unwrap it in Blender, and create a good basis for textures. So here we are here with our low poly mesh selected. We can choose UV tab and use Smart UV project. I usually just accept the everything as it is, press OK. It'll create a UV map. It'll automatically save that map. So the next step is to go into the shader mode. As you can see, we already have a material. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this item, this node here. And we're going to want to add a normal map. So a shift, right click will bring up the search, and we can input normal map. NO would suffice. There we go. It will do that again and type in IM, which will bring up image texture. And these are the two things that we're going to need to bake our normal map. On the far left now, we need to create a new image. We'll give it a title. I like to use whatever map I'm creating. I will state that first and then put a object description, in this case lizard object. So normal map, lizard object. Then by selecting the width and the height, I can input like together. Then I can input the new 2K, which is 2048. We're going to want to select 32-bit float for normal maps and press OK. Then in the image texture box, we're going to select the drop down and select the image map that we just created. In the color space, we'll choose non-color for normal maps. Now we need to go up to the rendering tab and choose cycles. And for me, I'm using CPU. If you have a desktop PC and a dedicated graphics card, then you should probably choose the GPU, but you'll know best which is faster. We go down to bake. We'll choose normal. That's the map we're going to bake. We'll choose select active, which means we're going to select the two objects that we want, the high poly and the low poly. And here in the extrusion, we're going to set it to 2.006 or 0.006, which works well most of the time for extrusion. Just gives you sort of the right amount of influence for the map to affect. And I did forget to change the sample size, so I made that 300. But here we're going to select the high poly mesh first. When you're doing normal maps, always select the high poly mesh first, then the low poly mesh. You press the second one by Control Select. Now we're ready for baking. You do have to have your image texture box selected before you press bake. Generally speaking, the initial processing time for these bakes are slower, and then as you get up to 25-30%, it goes pretty quick. So this is our normal map for the texture. You can see the detail that we have, but you can also see some irregularities like the color and the dark spots. So we will be adjusting our extrusion number to correct for those. So I've just hidden the high poly mesh, and this is the low poly mesh. And if we select the render button, then nothing's really changed yet. So we'll go back into our shading and join up these nodes. Take the normal to the normal and the color to color. And now we'll go back into layout, and you can see how the map texturing has been applied. And the anomalies that we saw in the white or the blue image, you can see here, they're present on the sculpt. Little bit of black along the ridge of the backbone. So now it's time to play with the extrusion a bit. So we'll bring this up to, I think it's 0.016. So again, with the high poly mesh selected first, and then the low poly by pressing Control Select, we can press Bake and redo the normal map. So now we have our normal map, and as you can see, the anomalies are gone, the darker areas and the colored areas. And looking at our sculpt, we'll hide the high poly mesh. And this is just simply our low poly mesh. It looks very clean. It's got all the details of the high poly mesh. And this is what you want if your goal is simply to unwrap it and apply a UV map, then so that you can texture, or you may want to go further and rig and animate. So this is just a necessary step either way. So we're back into the shader, and we want to introduce two other textures that will affect lighting. As you can see, the model is fairly bright and not a lot of contrast. In order to bring two shaders together for color, we're going to need a mixer. So we can search here for Mix RGB. Then we're going to add our first texture for Ambient Occlusion. We can right click on that texture and duplicate. Easy way to add another image texture. Going back to the first one, Ambient Occlusion. We'll title it, and in keeping with proper naming, we will first of all identify the map, which is AO. And then identify the object, lizard body. We still have our 2K resolution, and we no longer need to keep the 32-bit float, so we will be unchecking that. Pressing OK, we need to go to the image texture, and from the drop down, select the image we just created. The color space for all the other textures can be sRGB. Of course, we need now to change the baking map to Ambient Occlusion. So we also need to remove Select Active, because we will no longer be drawing information from the high poly model for a low poly. The ambient occlusion map will be made just with the low poly model. So in that case, we need to hide the high poly by turning off the eye and the camera. And now with ambient occlusion selected, we can bake. So the baking is done. And we need to move on to the next map, which is diffuse. We'll go through a similar process. We'll name it in the same convention. Diffuse map, lizard body, keep our 2K, and select OK. In the image texture box, we have to, well, there I just selected the map that we're going to be baking. But in the image texture box, we have to select the image that we just created. And now, with the low poly again selected, we can bake. Some maps take longer than others to bake. I shortened the time in the video for this one. It did take quite a bit longer. So now we have our two maps, and we're going to have to bring it all together using the mixing node. So we'll attach the color of each. Then we have a singular color attachment. As you can see, the shading on the lizard has become softer. You can see the ambient occlusion there, where you have some shadow inside around the belly. And now we need to add a geometry node and a color ramp. And this isn't necessary, so if you want to stop here, then that's fine. But these two nodes are going to allow us to get a stronger influence. So we're going to magnify the effect. We're going to adjust the black to about 0.4 anything, and the brightness will come down to 0.5 to 0.6 or 0.5 to 0.6. Then we can take the color from the color ramp up to the FAC on the mixer, and now everything's tied in together. So at this point, you can take this model into, let's say, Substance Painter and begin applying color and textures however you want. In Substance Painter, you can import the object file and then add resources. So that's where you bring in your maps, all your normal maps, your ambient occlusion, your diffuse maps. And it's worth mentioning here that all these maps that we've created, you should be saving them. You will get a message after a map is done that it has been saved internally, but you'll want to save all these maps in a separate folder along with the exported object file, low poly, and then you can import it all into programs like Substance Painter and Armor Paint. So for example, in this folder I have Mandalorian Frog Lady. So these are all my maps. And you can see the object file as well there. So everything is neat and organized, which becomes pretty important. So I've opened up the Mandalorian Frog Lady from the series Mandalorian. I did this in Nomad Sculpt and applied the same process that we went over here today. I really like the, as you can see, it's quite a flexible low poly model. It has all the details, even the surface skin details. So that wraps things up, and to be honest, this is a relatively recent area for me, and I had a hard time actually arriving at what I've shown you today on this tutorial. A lot of the confusion came from needing, I was thinking I had to create a displacement map, but as you can see, the process can be quite simple with a high poly, retopologized, low poly, bake normal maps, and you're there. So thanks for watching.